uh, lose, a
Yeah.
massive backer.
And countries like Vietnam will not be scared anymore and just can jump in and help.
That's true. That's a good point. I mean,
Ah.
it's a big barrier for other people to speak up and stand up. That's a good point. I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's true.
I,
It's
I
all
want
yeah.
Can I
Oh, go
propose
ahead.
something real quick?
For
So this is
sure.
something I brought up in my video today. I dropped one about Palestine today, as well. But I think so a while back, and I think DB might remember this too. There was supposed to be like a caravan to Palestine of hip hop artists. It never at least as far as I know, it never manifested because I lost like contact with folks. Maybe it did, and I just wasn't involved anymore. But I think one of the things that could be useful is to have like people, especially with like social media followings, go and like and be able to make connections and do that and do that caravan, especially people who have a lot of that can show a lot of people what's actually going on. Because I feel like right now the people over there mostly are like Western imperialist propaganda pieces, only showing what they want to show you, versus like being able to like Dan was speaking about elevating people's voice from actually that's actually out there. And I think that might be something that's worthwhile putting some energy into, which might not happen tomorrow, but I don't think
Yeah,
the struggle is going to end tomorrow. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
I just want to I mean if you're talking about like the flotilla thing that happened where they tried to enter Gaza via the sea and then the boat got raided
Oh shit.
like getting there you got to be clandestine to get in cuz it's a very militarized border. It's not um I mean I like I feel lucky in a way that that was the first border I really had to like cross because it like that radicalized me. That made me like really not want to deal with states. Period. Was like the fact that there was this like really arbitrary border, but these people had took it so far that they built this massive wall, and like I had a cabbie point at the wall and be like, "This is like our this is to us the equivalent of the Statue of Liberty," which I like the logic that that
What?
takes. Um,
Jeez.
so it's like with missions into the Palestinian state, we got to be very realistic about how difficult it is to cross that border and the repercussions from doing what you're proposing, VP. And that's not to say like don't do it, but I do feel like I have to like throw that warning out there as someone who went there very naively and unaware of what the consequences were for crossing that border. Um, I think what the Jordanians did was really interesting, though. Like going to the border, cutting through the fence, and like literally breaking into Palestine. And a lot of them were Palestinian refugees who did it in Jordan. I think that's amazing,
Hmm.
personally. Um, I would love to see more of that at all the borders. Fortress Europe, the southern border and northern border here. But
I
sorry,
just
that
think
was
it's
a tangent.
interesting how that it was such a big part of anti-communist rhetoric was the Berlin Wall, and yet these far right wingers who are so anti-communist are like the first people who want to build these massive militarized border walls. So yeah, the hypocrisy is palpable, but that's what you get from having completely incoherent, power hungry politics. I have a question. It's a little bit confrontational, but I think DB you might be able to respond to this, and BP as well. Anarchists should refrain from saying that no state's BS because it's ridiculous to believe the outcome of this will be a utopian anarchist commune of Palestine. What do you have to say in response to that?
Um, Man, that's I I'm not proposing any kind of utopian commune. I don't have the balls to do that at all. But I'd like to remind people that the border is not that old. You know, anarchism is literally older than that border.
Hmm.
So, um, and that's not to say that the decision on whether or not the border should be there is up to me. Um, but I do think that like to spread anarchy, you gotta push that line. I think it's interesting that there's, like I said earlier, there's Palestinian anarchists who are trying to figure out what like an Arab anarchy looks like, and I think all anarchists should look to them if you're talking about that. Like, but I don't think it's. I actually no. I think it is ridiculous to say there's no borders, and I ride with that. Like, I think that you got to be ridiculous sometimes. And when I say borders, I'm literally meaning state borders, bourgeois state borders at that. So I'm not referring to natural borders, or other type of like bioregional borders, as much as I think that's like a little colonial, at least in the context of the U.S. So yeah, that I mean, my initial response to that is to laugh, like, to be honest.
I would say that okay, sure, we're ridiculous, but like also so is the idea that humanity is not about to go extinct is ridiculous too. But then we try to not like do something about that. And as far as like the idea of us looking for some crazy utopia, that's not true. All people really advocate no borders and stuff like that, or like anarchy within Palestine, is that people from Palestine could determine their own goddamn destiny. That's all people are really advocating. And who am I to say what the fuck that would look like? I'm across the fucking world. That would make no damn sense. Like, but also like the idea that I'm supposed to or support these borders that are put in place by like let's not hold no punch. People are gonna make mad about this, but white supremacists. I mean, I know they're not all white, but they are all white supremacists. So let's like, why are we gonna respect those borders? Why is that gonna be something we're gonna uphold instead? And I don't think it's like anybody really believes that there's gonna be utopia because we stop borders, because we move into a space where people are autonomous. That's not what people believe in the first place. But I think the argument is more, it's like to be more freedom and more opportunity to be able to be liberated within your community, within your life, than if you trust the people who are running it right now, who are clearly genocidal in intent and only care about their own power. So,
I think that those are both very good responses. I mean, I think that what you're reminding me of is what anarchism actually means, which is doing everything that we can to dismantle unjust hierarchies to whatever extent that we possibly can. And I think it's also good. And I think I can't remember if it was BP or DB. One of you said that it's like an opportunity for engaging politically with people and having them question their preconceived notions, and just reminding them that any state solution isn't truly a solution, and these issues won't really be solved until these hierarchies are dismantled that place the Israeli, state, the Israeli white supremacists, the Israeli fascists, in such a powerful position over so many other people in society. Not just talking about Palestinians, by the way, but also talking about the African Jews who are being oppressed in Israel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think that's safe to say. Go ahead.
I just wanted to speak on the African Jew thing because I haven't yet, and that was actually the most striking thing to me, was going there and being like, oh, there's Black Jews. I never would have thought. And then like realizing that they're all janitors and like they're doing all the menial work and whatnot, and also to remind us that like, I mean, it was within the last year, they were fighting police in the streets. Like that struggle is happening within this whole other struggle. And, one of the histories I learned while being there from some Black Jews that I actually went and had what is the Friday dinner, Shabbat. They invited me to Shabbat. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, but like the Friday dinner. And they were telling me that their family was, Israel flew in and grabbed them during the Ethiopian Civil War. And that brought them there. But like, their family is basically worse off than they think they would have been if they would have stayed in Ethiopia, because they didn't realize that they were coming to like a white supremacist nation. And this was, I forget when that civil war was, but sorry, I didn't speak about that earlier. I felt like I should say that.
No, that's really important context, I think. And it's not a story that we hear, at all. Like, I don't I'm sure if I search Google News right now, you're not going to see a lot of info on the Ethiopian Jews struggle in Israel.
Mm.
So I guess looking forward now, we're coming into the last 30 minutes or so, folks. So if you have any questions or comments you want to share with the panel, please feel free to do so. But looking forward now, I'm really curious what you think, DB, that we can do to help in this situation. A lot of people do want to help, but we're not sure what to do. I mean, there have been some massive fundraisers lately for Palestinian children and that sort of thing. But beyond donating money, what can we do to try to help with the situation?
Well, for me, there's like multiple strategies, I guess you could take. Um, I don't recommend this, but I want to start here, and that is getting your butt to Israel or Palestine or Jordan or Egypt and putting your body on the line. Again, I can't recommend that, but that's, one example. Another example or another thing you could do, honestly, is like recognize, like, especially if you're in the U.S., recognize that, the U.S. just gave them $745 million to buy weapons from U.S. weapons manufacturers. So the government's not only giving money to Israel, they're weirdly giving money to the weapons and arm manufacturers. And so I think it's worth digging around and finding and being creative with targets you want to target. And then the very last thing I would say is, this goes against my own principles, but I think people can do it principally. Call your fucking politician and tell them to stop funding. And I think, there's a full spectrum of possibilities that we can do to show solidarity and to be in solidarity. But you just got to stay principled and be creative.
Yeah.
I'd also want to add, this is not really a tactic I usually like a lot, but I also want to add BDS, boycott, the sanction. I forget what the D stands for, but BDS.
Divest.
So, like, boycott, divest, sanction.
Boycott,
Yeah,
divest, sanction.
And so, like, that means any of the things that come out of Israel that is produced in Israel, you don't buy it, you don't purchase it, you like boycott it, so they don't, so you're not adding to those funds. And that's like, I think the very minimal, for show, and I think it can get complicated because you might be buying stuff and not even realizing that. But I think that's something I do want to put out there. It's not usually a tactic I use. I don't boycott a lot, but especially when we're across the fucking world, that's at least something, you know what I mean? So it's at least the beginning, as well as bringing awareness to it, and letting people know like what's really going on, and trying to have a counter narrative to the propaganda the U.S. putting out. You know what I mean?
I want to quickly add to that, just to like give an example of what I mean by creative thoughts. BDS is for economic damage, right? You want to economically damage the state of Israel. You don't necessarily need to boycott, divest, or sanction to cause economic damage to Israel. For example, the workers in Italy who aren't loading the weapons, right? They went on strike. You could block ports, stop these things from coming there. There's a boat coming into Oakland, which hasn't been to Oakland for years because of actions like, blocking the port, or the workers in Oakland not emptying the boat. So, but it's making a return and people are moving on that. So I think like, just being creative and really trying to escape the prescribed methods of like expressing our concern or whatever that the state allows us to do.
Yeah, blocking ports, I want to say too, is a really good tactic, because when they can't land, that costs them millions and millions every day.
Oh, yeah.
Like I remember we did one port shut down back during Occupy, which we'll talk about a different time, but that costs like $64 million for that one fucking day. And so just think about the repercussions can be done from those type of situations. That's all I said.
The longshoremen during BLM last year, they shut down the West Coast for one day, and it was $1 billion in lost trade That's just and the news didn't cover it at all. They didn't want to talk about that at all because you know why? Because like if people started to catch on how much power that has, it would start giving people ideas. I like to always just add on when we're talking about things like boycotts or any of this kind of stuff, just like don't act alone. You know, if hopefully by now you're already a member of an org, but if you're not, join an org, or form an org or do something, but work with other people, turn it into a movement. You know, like if you just stop buying, stuff from Israel as an individual, it literally does nothing. It's lifestyleism. You know, it's a waste of your energy and time. But if you can get other people to join with you with anything like that, whether even with like, and again, I'm an anarchist. I'm not a reformist, but you can put pressure on politicians. And I think that the protests around the world have been really actually pretty powerful. It's the first time I've seen this kind of like mass uprising against Israeli violence against the Palestinian people. And if we could sustain that, it will have influence and impact, I think.
And remember, the U.S. is still the biggest sponsor for Israel. So do something about it.
Especially if in the USA. Yeah, good point. Really good point. But yeah, don't act alone. Find an org, talk to the people in your org, talk to your neighbors, and build a mass action. That's the way. That's just general advice for any situation, not just this one.
Yeah. I would also add, think about secondary and tertiary targets. Like for example, Ben and Jerry's, I think, is on the BDS list. They have to get their milk from somewhere, right? Like maybe you could go talk to the cow farmer. Mm-hmm. Maybe make it hard for them to get milk to make their ice cream, or if you're a freegan or whatever, maybe pick your targets with your 5-finger discount. Like this is what I'm saying when I say be creative. Like let's start thinking outside the box. Let's do stuff we already do and just like pick better targets.
Yeah, excellent point. We've got time left. Does anybody have anything? BP, did you have anything you wanted to ask DB or anything you wanted to say? As in regards to the situation, I'm looking through the chat now just to see if anybody has any other comments or questions or anything like that.
How do you feel like this struggles changed over these years? Like at least we've known each other, and like since back when we first started organizing Solidarity in Palestine to now in this country specifically.
I think a lot's changed in this country in general. I went to the rally here, and it was bigger than anything I've ever seen for a pro-Palestinian rally. And I think there's like a different attitude regarding protest in general and within the states. Like a lot of the discussions regarding respectability or violence have changed drastically. I still think that though a lot of the nonprofit industrial complex here in the States still does have a lot of influence. And I think in certain respects you have more public figures who are able to recoup the energy, specifically regarding the Palestinian liberation. And this is just within the state. So I think we have to be cautious about that. And in particular, I think Black people are primed to help point out the Uncle Toms that are more present now than I think they've been in the past regarding, again, the Palestinian liberation. So yeah, that's my answer to like how things have changed over the last, decade or so.
All right, yeah. I do want to say also it's really important, and I've been trying to put this through certain folks that aren't necessarily on our tip about it. Palestinians have had solidarity with us. We're trying to because I remember Ferguson, right? When that was going down, they were trying to spread as much information to us as they possibly could on how to deal with the police weapons, and specifically the same weapons they were using on us as the same weapons they were using in Palestine and in Israel. So not to the same extreme clearly, but they were definitely the same weapon. So I think it's we come to a space where I think it's a good time for us to show that same solidarity back, because we haven't got that much solidarity from folks. So I think that's showing the return to love is important. You know what I mean? So
Here's the thing. I just found out that mostly Vietnam export food to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And if we really do the sanction thing, the people is going to hurt.
I don't know. What do you think about that? I mean, should because this is something that gets brought up in a lot of other different contexts where, like, should we stop medical and food exports and that kind of stuff to Israel? Any thoughts on that?
I don't have really any thoughts on that. I've avoided a lot of BDS strategies. So I don't really have a lot of thoughts. I think people should talk about it and figure that out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that, like, a lot of people, they find a connection between what's happening in Palestine with what happened in apartheid South Africa, and they point often to BDS working there so successfully, and use that as a way of, like, justifying or legitimizing or, like, giving reason to the call for BDS of Israel. So I think, like, maybe looking at the impacts of BDS in South Africa regarding those specific issues might be worth looking into. That's where I would start, I guess. And also, like, yeah, I'm curious as to, like, what kind of, I would be curious to see what kind of food's being shipped there.
Who's getting it? That'd be
Right.
another question. Like, who's buying it? Where's it going? Who's eating it?
It's like Vietnam was under severe sanction after the Vietnam War. So, and my mom lived through that time, and I know that how horrible it is. It was the people that's gonna hurt. Like, it doesn't change the regime at all. It's just like the people are gonna be hungry and dying.
Yeah, I don't know. That's way too complicated for me to, and I know way too little about it to try to tackle it myself. So I guess I'll just have to try to keep investigating and learn more. We got a good question from Transylvanian. BP, did you have something to say, or?
Yeah, I was about to say, I just honestly kind of feel a little conflicted, because, like, we realize that a lot of times it's the people at the bottom, which would be, like, literally Palestinians, black folks, and so on and so forth, that suffer. But as a general populace of like that are respected in Israel, that are considered Israeli by the government, like whether they consider everybody Israeli officially, but unofficially it's not the same, right? If they're like, a lot of them support super hard like the genocide that's happening. So it's like I feel conflicted about that, because people at the bottom, yeah, but the people more in the middle, I don't really feel that much empathy for if y'all going hungry, if you want to keep supporting that genocide that's happening. So it feels like, yeah, it's definitely hella complicated, and I don't know the details of it. I don't know what's being shipped. I don't know what other places they get food from, you know what I mean? But I think one of the things I would think is that the US and other places aren't going to stop supporting Israel. So if it's like, if like other countries were divesting from them, it would just start getting it chip away to support. So there's more dependent on like the US, which I don't see that being necessarily a bad thing as far as that, because then some of the funds that they're putting there for weapons instead would have to go to food and would start damaging their ability, I think. But I'm not, like, again, I'm not an expert, but that's just what I think. Just as some asshole on YouTube talking.
Same here. No, it's something I guess I'll keep investigating and thinking about it and try and learn more. If anybody has any thoughts on it, let us know in the comments in the chat. But Transylvania asked, can you ask about the strikes Palestinians are engaging in across Israel? I know they had a big general strike on the 18th, right? In occupied territories. Could it become a general strike involving all Palestinians? I would extend that question to say, I think that we should be having strikes, solidarity strikes around the world. I mean, like, that's really what we need to start moving our movement towards. I really believe that. Just solidarity strikes, building an internationalist movement, communicating more with each other. But yeah, I'd like to hear what the panel has to say about that as well.
The first thing I think about, and the first thing I thought about when I saw that they were going on strike was like the impact that would have on Israeli society. And, for example, whenever I crossed when I went from the West Bank into like Tel Aviv or whatever, there's a lot of Palestinians that are crossing, and a lot of them are essentially, like house workers and stuff like that, servants, and other low menial jobs, which often have very big ripple effects. Um, so yeah, I'm always down for a general strike or whatever. Um, yeah, I hope it turns
I
good.
think we all are.
I'm yeah, I'm like curious to see what it does and what it has exposed, but I haven't been able to keep up with it over the last, like, it was yesterday I think, right, or today, that they went on strike. So I don't know. I haven't been able to keep up with it.
Yeah, I need to catch up on it too. I did read a short article about it on the 18th that it was I don't know what the impact or fallout from that was. I like this suggestion from Sean Minas, which is make quality street art in solidarity with Palestinians. And I will say that's something anybody can do, is agitation. Anybody can go on Facebook or share with your friends and family your position. I think it's one of those things where a lot of people just kind of go with the flow when it comes to this kind of thing, and they just assume that Israel are the good guys because that's just
No,
the narrative that they've been told for like
weird.
so long. But when they start to see their friends, people that they care about, the people that they respect,
Mm.
counter that narrative, then they'll start to question those propagandistic, hegemonic
You're not even gonna say
notions. So
sorry, bro. Sorry,
it's okay.
I'm at a park. I just got hit with the baseball, and dude just walked like nothing happened.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
sorry.
That's all right.
Uh,
Sorry. I'm sorry that happened to you.
yeah,
Uh,
but I'm a big proponent of street art. I love that idea, and yeah, do it.
yeah.
Paint the walls.
Agitate, for sure. BP, you're an artist. You got any advice for folks who want to agitate?
I mean, damn, just do it any way you can, right? Whatever your skills are, whatever your arts are, agitate. You know what I mean? Don't. I would say like, don't hold your punches. I'm a little scared to say that because there's some shit views out here, and there is a line where some people go over into like actual anti-Semitism. So I'm scared to just say do your thing, but educate yourself, get that down, and then do your thing. You know what I mean? So you
Yeah,
don't cross
good
that
point.
line until I actually worry about more from like white folks than anybody else, to be 100. But
You should be worried about that.
but I definitely think like, yeah, I think street art, I think, as well as like, and I'm down if we want to do like performances, whatever, Zoom or something to raise funds for folks. We should do shit like that, show solidarity and whatever we can. So we get one of the things, just getting that counter narrative out there, getting like the truth about what's actually happening versus the propaganda out there in any way possible. And then if you're a poet, that way, if you're a rapper, that way, singer, painter, so on and so forth. But I would also advocate that people say it from their perspective and not try to put themselves on other people's perspectives, because you don't necessarily know what those other folks' struggles are. But speak from like, okay, this is what I'm seeing from the outside. This is why this is effed up. You can do that in a respectful way. So make sure that's happening. I don't know. I feel like I'm ranting a little bit, but that's kind of the things I want to emphasize on. So.
Oh, that's a really good point. And I think this point from Wilhelm is a good point too. Remember that we were against the Israeli government, not Jewish people. And I know that there are fascists who will try to play it both ways. And then, it's kind of like, if you're a fascist, it's a good thing no matter how this swings. Because like, if people are pro-Israeli, then you can swing it as like, oh, see, this is why we need ethno-states. And they can, use that fascist line of rhetoric. But then if the sentiment goes anti-Israel, then they'll start trying to stoke, anti-Semitic propaganda and rhetoric. So please don't fall into that trap of becoming a puppet for fascists. Have a little nuance and try to be very clear in the way that you express your ideas. I think that's a good point, BP and Wilhelm. Something to be careful about. Reese just said, I think that as anarchists, we are in a unique position in criticizing Israel as it relates to anti-Semitism. Really important to differentiate between nations and people. Thank you. I think that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah. And that really lines up with what DB was saying about how we should not be, as anarchists at least, we should not be centering this on a state discussion. I think that's something that I really, that resonated with me. So yeah, we do have, I guess that's a good point.